as if we had planned it. This is a wonderful opportunity now that we are on the feed. Sorry, Shane, I'll call you back later if you're listening. If you got one of those infernal devices, do what I just did, please, and turn it off for the next hour or so, maybe less, just to make sure. Because honestly, when the room is this full, the reception is terrible anyway, and you don't want to be the one who ends up having to run out of the room in a hurry to shut your phone down and answer it. Stop. We're going to ignore it if it goes off again. The Jewish tradition says a lot about this moment, about the entire enterprise of life and death, of mourning, of burial, and of ritual. Some of it is very familiar. Some of it is incredibly logically and emotionally based. Other pieces of it have become mythologized over time, occasionally misunderstood. I want to thank you all for being here today. The family's not supposed to. And as much as I feel like family to this family, as rabbi, I thank you for being here. It's an affirmation of who we are as a community. It's an affirmation of who we are as a people. It's an affirmation of the life we have come here to remember and to celebrate today. Because those of us who knew Phil well know that the best Phil was the one who was surrounded by joy and people and love. And that's what this room is filled with today. So I thank you for that. Whatever you're feeling is right. We all mourn differently. We all grieve differently. Phil was a complex human being, as we all are. For some of us, the proper way to remember Phil is in sadness that he's no longer with us. And we acknowledge that and we support those who need that response. For many of us, the proper way to remember Phil was with laughter and the stories that have already begun to be told over the last weeks and even months, and will be retold again in the coming week. And that's okay. That's the way he would have wanted it. That's the way we need to get comfortable with it being again, those of us who need to go the other way. So please don't hold back. Be aware, but do not hold back. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid ki mimini balemot, I have set the eternal always before me. God is at my side, I shall not be moved. Therefore does my heart exult and my soul rejoice, my being is secure. For you will not abandon me to death, nor let your faithful ones see destruction. You show me the path of life. Your presence brings fullness of joy. Enduring happiness is your gift. Death has taken our beloved Phil. Our friends grieve in their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them, O God, and be with them. For Phil's love that united us in life, which death cannot sever, for his companionship shared along life's paths, which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of his heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and are now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It tells us of our kinship with the Creator in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Adonai ro'i lo echsar, binot deshe yarbitseni, Al mei menuchot yenahaleni nafshi yeshovev. Yancheni v'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki elech begeit salmavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiv techa mishantecha. Hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai. Dishanta vashemen roshi kosi rivaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shafti beveit Adonai la'orech yamim. O God, you are my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me to lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside the still waters. You restore my soul. You guide me in straight paths for the sake of your name. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You've prepared a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You've anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. Esoinai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri Esoinai el heharim me'ayin yavo ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim v'aretz. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help will come from God, the maker of heaven and earth, who will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian, your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming now and forever. To everything there is a season, and a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, and yes, a time to die. A time to plant and a time to uproot what is planted, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. The poet has written, "After my death, mourn me thus. There was a man, and see, he is no more. Before his time, his life was ended, and the song of his life was broken. Oh, but he had one more melody, and now that melody is lost forever. Lost forever." In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember. In the opening of buds and the rebirth of spring, we remember. In the rustling of leaves, the beauty of autumn, we remember. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember then too. And so long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember. Birth is a beginning and death a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength or strength to weakness and often back again, from health to sickness and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey, stage by stage, that sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, death is a destination, and life is that journey, that sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage from birth to death to life everlasting. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai natan ve'Adonai lakach, yehi shem Adonai mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief, with the valley of shadow. Death and sorrow are no strangers to us. Yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave, that there is strength in faith. And so with Job we say, Adonai natan, God, you have given. You gave us Phil, a loved one who will not be forgotten, for all that is good and enduring in his life. We offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach, God, you have now taken away. And so we pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love, even as we struggle at this moment to say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevorach, blessed be the name of God, now and forever. I invite us all who have gathered here today to take a moment for silent reflection, memory, and prayer. May the words of our mouths, the meditations of our hearts be acceptable always in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. There's a powerful reading that I was first made aware of years and years ago at summer camp. It talks about each of our lives being like a jigsaw puzzle. Only because we live together, the pieces don't stay distinctly unique in their own boxes. And so as we go through our lives, there are times when we find there are pieces missing. We find that we're walking around with pieces to somebody else's puzzle that we're not sure what to do with. I was reminded of that as I was thinking about Phil for today. It felt like he had pieces of so many of our puzzles. And when he would bring people together, the pieces would start to fit into the right puzzles. The holes and the gaps we felt began to be filled. I had the privilege over the last 20 months, and I'll talk about it more in a minute, of meeting with Phil way more Thursdays than we didn't. It became our version of Tuesdays with Maury in a very real and profound way. And very early on, we started to talk about what this day would feel like when it came for him, what he wanted us to feel today. Surprise, he wanted to get as many people together as he could to do something fun, perhaps educational, certainly distracting and entertaining, that we all walked away from saying, I'm glad I went. Like leading a funeral service isn't already hard enough. And for a while we played with the idea that this was the moment I would look at the tech crew and say, start the video. And Phil would pop up behind me to tell you what he wanted you to know today and to be more concerned about and thinking about. It didn't happen. Part of me is really glad it didn't. In retrospect, part of me is a little bit sad because I could at least have handed off to Phil to say, okay, set the table for yourself. But instead, we come to the eulogies now. We come to celebrating his life, the good things that have us so sad because we're missing them in his passing. And it's like that puzzle. Each of us carries a slightly different piece and a slightly different view. And the more people that we can get talking over the next week, sharing their stories with and of Phil, the more at the end of this week of celebrating him and helping the family to begin to get used to what life is going to be like without him, the more puzzles will be complete, the more we will have the full sense. But for now, we're going to keep it pretty basic and simple. And so I'd like to invite his sister, Deb, and her husband, Lou, to join us and to start talking and sharing the Phil that they know.
Okay, old school, new school.
Morning, everyone. It is overwhelming to see how many friends and family are here today to honor and remember my beloved brother, Philip. It's impossible to capture the life of someone like Phil in a few short moments, but I hope to share, and so does Lou, a small piece of the extraordinary man he was, the deep love he gave, and the impact he had on all of us. Phil was my big brother, my protector, my champion, my lifelong friend, and my best friend to my boys and to the girls. He loved Josh and Danny, Kate and Katie, and all the children that come with them. From the time we were little, he looked out for me, whether it was making sure I was safe at school or in our neighborhood or stepping in to cover a very large international phone bill that I had racked up, talking to Lou, my then fiance, who was stationed in Germany. Phil was there. I didn't quite understand what calling every day, a couple times a day, would cost.
Collect.
Quiet.
At 3 o'clock in the morning.
Quietly, fiercely, and without hesitation. Our friendship was unique, special in a way that I know many siblings never ever experience. We laughed hard. We fought sometimes, okay, usually instigated by me, I'm sure. And we loved each other deeply. As a kid, I pushed Phil's every buttons, like running into his room first thing in the morning, grabbing all his blankets, running and making a mad dash to Mom and Dad's room and screaming, "Phil's chasing me and he's gonna hit me." Of course, Phil got in trouble, and I walked away unscathed. I'm sure many of you who already know me are shocked to hear that. And yet, despite the countless times I got on his very last nerve, Phil never stopped being the very best brother a sister could ever ask for. He took it all in stride, and he loved me with his whole heart. Phil's love for other was boundless. Family and friends was his everything. He was the kind of man who would give the shirt off his back, literally to a stranger, if it meant making their lives just a little better. His heart was enormous, and his loyalty was unshaken. Phil cared for our dad with such devotion through his battle of Parkinson's. He loved fiercely our family. He was the very best uncle to the children, Josh, Kate, Daniel, and Danny. And he was the very best great uncle to Kara, Kristen, Kaylee, Olivia, Everett, and Benjamin. He adored each of them and took such pride in them. Some of my favorite memories with Phil are the ones that make us laugh even today. Like the time Mom and Dad were outside burning the grass to fertilize it. I don't understand it to this day, but they were outside burning the grass, and Phil and I were inside
lawn.
The lawn.
The lawn.
Entertain. And Phil and I were inside playing catch with a priceless antique porcelain doll that my grandmother had finally gotten me because she believed I was mature enough and responsible enough to take care of this priceless antique doll. Well, we to this day still don't know who dropped it as we were playing catch with the doll across the living room. Phil, it had to be you because you're not here to defend yourself. So we're gonna go with the fact that Phil dropped the doll and it shattered on the floor. Terrified of getting in trouble, we quietly tried to glue the pieces back together and just hoped for the best. Needless to say, we were in big trouble, but we faced it together. Or the time that Phil thought it would be a great idea to squeeze 10 people into my Datsun B210 Honeybee. Why? Simply because he could try it. That was Phil, spontaneous and never one to pass up a chance to do something just a little outrageous.
And also like the toys that he bought just because the kids were coming over. The popcorn machine, the hot dog roller, the soft ice cream machine, the hard ice cream machine, the icy machine, the snow cone machine, the pizza oven, two pizza ovens. And that was just for the children. He also bought a set it and forget it, a Blackstone, a Margaritaville, a smoker, a grill, 2 heated lanterns, a fire pit, and the donut maker that Mom said no. Enough. He did all of this. He bought all of these because he wanted to make sure that his grandnieces and nephews could have fun and play and also support Temple Solel's religious school. By the way, a garage sale will happen right after Shiva.
If one of those items sounds interesting to you, contact us. We're cleaning out Mom's house. 20 months ago, our world changed when Phil received a devastating diagnosis of stage 4 pancreatic cancer. He was told that he could live 2 to 4 months without chemo and 8 to 12 months if he subjected himself to the chemo treatments. He never gave up. He wanted to be here for his family and friends. He took the chemo option and fought through all the pain for 20 months. His doctors were amazed at his determination, and from the beginning, I made a promise to him that I would be by his side through it all. And I meant it. Phil worried so much, not about himself and not about his pain or his cancer diagnosis, but about all of us. He worried terribly about Mom and what would happen if he was gone. And then how would I be able to support Mom when it was supposed to be the two of us together doing it? How hard this would be on her. He worried about Lou. He worried about my job. He worried about the kids, the grandkids, my staff, and my friends. He would often say, "You can't miss it. So much work, Deb. You have to go to work. It's time for you to go back to work. I'll make it. I'll be fine." He never wanted to be a burden to any of us. But what he didn't realize was that being there for him was one of the greatest honors of my life. We left no stone unturned. We went to Memorial Sloan Kettering after the local doctors at Hopkins and Maryland Oncology had said there were no more options. When MSK confirmed that everything had already been done and praised the care that Phil had already received, it was both heartbreaking and reassuring. Heartbreaking because Phil's final hope was fading, and reassuring because we knew he had received the best care possible. The journey was long and incredibly painful, physically and emotionally and spiritually. But Phil was a warrior, and so was Mom. We walked this road as a family, holding each other up, loving each other through every moment, never letting go of our promise that we would leave no stone unturned, and that he would leave this world with dignity and without pain.
And in the end, Hospice of Chesapeake became our lifeline. When the time came, and although it was a very difficult decision that Deb and Mom had to make to move Phil out of the house, we knew it was the only way to keep him comfortable and pain-free. I can't tell you about the nurses at the hospice center, how absolutely magnificent they were, not just to Phil, not just to their patient, but to the entire family. The nurses and caregivers at hospice treated Phil with such compassion, and for that we are eternally grateful.
I know we're not supposed to thank people, but I personally and Lou want to personally thank the doctors and the nurses who fought for Phil's life for nearly 2 years. Our friends who visited him both at home and in hospice. My colleagues and friends from Howard County Public Schools who kept things always going at work so that I could be fully present with Mom and Phil. And our extended family who wrapped Phil, me, Mom, Lou, and the boys and the grandchildren and great-grandchildren in their love. To Lou, to Josh, to Danny, Kate, and Katie, and most of all, Mom, thank you. Thank you for holding us together, for holding me together, and for loving Phil so well.
Phil died peacefully, absolutely pain-free, surrounded by love.
He is with our loved ones who went before us, even including losing my daughter, Christy Ann. Now it's Phil's turn to be the very best great uncle in heaven rather than here on earth. His memory will forever be a blessing. His love will forever be a part of me. Rest easy, my dear brother. You kept your promises, and I kept mine. We love you so much.
And suddenly again, I'm horribly missing that video that never got made. Thank you, Deb and Lou, for your touching words and memories. All of us here who have had the privilege of knowing Phil recognize that Phil was at his best, surrounded by people he loved and respected, doing things for and with them and for their entertainment and enjoyment. But before we get into that, those of you who've had the privilege of going to the Smithsonian when the Hope Diamond is out and on display in a big case, circular, tabletop, that you have to walk around. It's a diamond. It's huge, but it's a diamond. You could conceivably walk up to the table, look at it, and walk away. But because of the way the room is set up, nobody does. We all walk around the table. And what happens as we walk around the table is that we have different experiences of that diamond in the middle of it. That's what our lives are like. Phil is that diamond right now. And as we walk around the table, we experience and see different aspects, different reflections of ourselves, different elements of him and all that he does and is. Because the truth is that Phil was at his best surrounded by people he loved and respected, but the truth is that this was just the tip of the iceberg. And as is often the case, it is the unseen currents beneath the surface that are the most interesting, the most identifying, that sometimes defy our ability to describe in 37 words or less.
We gave you 38.
Phil was among the first people I met when I came to Bowie 25 years ago. At dinner at his parents' house, during that courting ritual between prospective rabbi and congregation that led me to be here at Solel. He was among the first of my future congregants I got to meet who was close to my own age. And so I saw familiar patterns. I saw a strong sense of his Jewish identity, struggling to find its full voice and a comfortable role in the community. I saw a respect for tradition and history, both our people's and his family's, mixed with an equally strong desire to find his own youthful expression that he needed in order to make it real for him. And over the passing of the years, as our families grew closer, I saw the love for his family and his willingness to do so much for them, and as Deb and Lou just pointed out, literally for anybody who he brought into the family. I, too, was welcomed into the orbit of those who were drawn to him and to whom he was drawn. But I also saw his challenges in continuing to seek his own comfortable Jewish expression. Not that his Judaism was ever a course for discomfort. It was just a part of him that for so long seemed to be there, seeking the vocabulary he needed to express it. Similarly, always surrounded by his family and friends, there was also his search for his true life partner. And yes, there were glorious periods when he and we thought he might have found that person. But in the end, while blessed with a huge quantity of high-quality friends, that one true and lasting partner was a role that kept coming back to the ones who were born into it, and not the ones he could choose. But you had to get really close to him to be in a position to recognize that this was something that was actually missing in his life. Because his life was so full of people and things and events, and he was so capable of living it on his terms, in his own way, at times by himself. One of the many ironies of Phil's life was that the years leading up to his diagnosis were filled with some of his greatest joys and successes. Another generation of grandnieces and nephews to bring more excitement and chaos and joy and love. He finally achieved what he considered to be his dream job, his last, only to have to leave it shortly thereafter to fight the cancer. There was the trip to Israel a few years before that, which engaged him for 12 days in ways that I had never seen him engaged before. The pinnacle moment of that week, if it wasn't the 11-day conversation between him and Shani about every small detail that he needed more information and understanding of, was that moment in a gift shop in Sfat. Picking out his talit. Picking out his talit. Phil needed a talit? That didn't go with the way he projected his Judaism to most of us. But he had two, one in each hand. One more beautiful than the other more beautiful than the first. And he literally could not make up his mind. And one by one, family members who were on the trip came by, themselves also looking for one for Joel at that point, and they gave their opinions, and he was no closer to deciding. The rest of us on the trip who came by were called over. Oh, that one's nice. Oh, that one's nice. Which one do you like better, Phil? I don't know. 45 minutes. And I finally got to appreciate the decision he eventually made this morning, seeing him wrapped in it, before you all came in and we closed the casket. You chose right. It was a good choice. But that talit wasn't the only surprise. I got one of those puzzle pieces right before this service started, when one of my sources, who will remain anonymous to protect the innocent, shared with me a story that Phil himself had never gotten around to sharing with me on any of those Thursdays or at any other time over the last 20 months. We used to talk about, when he would come in on Thursday, how they'd watch services the preceding Friday night. Religiously, if you will. Sorry, I had to. What he never got around to telling me was that he had taken to keeping a siddur in the armchair so that he could pull it out and participate from home and not just watch the service. Because those of us who were ever here for a service when Phil was here know where he sat. It was in the production booth, even on the nights he wasn't producing. That was where he was comfortable. So to hear that he had actually spirited a prayer book and was keeping it and using it at home is a gift of a puzzle piece to Phil that I just learned from somewhere else. Because he never bothered to share it with me. Because I'm not sure he knew how to share that piece of himself with me without risking me jumping to all kinds of wrong conclusions. And shortly before all of that, he had found that role that he was comfortable playing here in the life of his Jewish community as our technology guru. One that allowed him to feel like he was giving back to the congregation in which he was raised by sharing his expertise comfortably and easily, only to have to back away from that too to help take care of Joel and his own protracted health challenges at the end of his life. And all too quickly after Joel's passing, our attention turned to helping Phil deal with his own illness. But what a 20 months it turned out to be. Forget the fact that it was longer than any of us had a right to expect. It was quality. He was with us to the end. Phil turned his focus, his energy, his stubborn streak towards living. Not just surviving, but living in the face of dire news. Not for himself, or should I say not just for himself, but for those he loved and those who loved him. He set a series of goals in relation to his family members and his friends, some seemingly reasonable, some a long shot from the beginning, some looking back that probably seemed like a good idea at the time and afterwards left him wondering why he had decided to expend so much energy, but recognizing how much joy he got out of it anyway. And outside of that last trip to Orlando, the one coming up, he made virtually all of them. And in between those blips on the timeline, you who are here today know best. He sought to surround himself with as many friends and family, as much entertainment, enjoyment, and chaos, to celebrate life rather than contemplating our mortality and what comes at the end. Not that he didn't take his diagnosis seriously, because he did. He simply refused to let it define him any more than it absolutely had to. And in a move that may have surprised some, he turned to his recently found comfort at Solel, and Thursday morning became our time to talk. And some weeks I was pretty sure that I was going to have to go to the house when I heard him on the phone midweek. And up until the end, he used that as an excuse to get his butt up no matter how he felt, to hide the pain, and to give himself some variety and something to look forward to. Every week. At the outset, we talked a lot about legacy, how he could leave a piece of himself behind, as we've talked about. But the truth is, he so outlived the expectations he was originally given, the original ideas he had for what that video would look like, that at first we allowed ourselves to be able to keep putting the recording off until we realized that the message he originally thought of sharing was no longer relevant. And then we came to realize it might not even be necessary. Over time, we talked of almost everything, apparently not the Siddur. Current events, his health, sports, the life of the congregation. I would like to think that I helped him some in recognizing why so many things he thought he was doing specifically to help Rita cope with his illness failed to have the effect that he desired them to have, and left her wondering why he continued to need to buy all these things that she was going to have to hold the yard sale to get rid of eventually. Why he and Deb could hear the same words from a doctor and interpret them in such very different ways, and both still get what they needed from those same words. My first hint that he actually was beginning to slow down was when you were able to talk him out of getting that donut machine.
I promise we'd order it afterwards. Sorry, Laura.
Those of you who've never experienced them, they're actually really cool. We had one here a couple of years ago. But most of all, until the last couple of weeks, we spent a lot of our time talking about his next survival goal and last weekend's gathering, as he continued to enjoy his life surrounded by friends and family. What a blessing. The absolutely only time we ever talked of his disappointment with his progress was when you all came back from New York. Because while you heard the reassurance that you had succeeded to that point with the doctor's help in getting him the best care possible, he heard something very different because of where he was around that table. He heard that there would not be a trial available. And to him, as much as he never talked about it, that turned out to be the loss of what had become in his mind the last hope for a miraculous ending. Not that he had ever expected one, but to have that possibility absolutely removed once and for all turned out to be the turning point. And as the physical pain finally began its final conquest of his physical being, to watch you all rally around finding him physical and emotional comfort was also a blessing. To see you all overcome your own needs and desires to hold on, to keep control, to allow hospice in, to ease his pain was so beautiful, no matter how painful it felt in the moment. And when it was all said and done, Phil had significantly outlived the most optimistic timelines he had been given at the start. Philip Charthower is in the 1% of survivors of that dread disease. He had filled more days than any of us could have expected or hoped for, with joy and love and family and friends and blessings and perspective and lessons on how to live our lives. In his own dying, Phil taught us what it means to live and live well. And I cannot think of a better way to celebrate his life than to embrace those lessons and his example of how to live our lives with meaning and joy and a pizza and a margarita and an icy and some popcorn and a mediocre movie, so that fortified we can move forward together and carry him with us in all that we do. Secure that when our time comes, he will be waiting for us with a full schedule of fun and all the preparations we need taken care of. And I guarantee you, because he's Phil, there will be fresh donuts waiting for us. Because to his very last day, that is who Phil was and still is, and with our hope and help, always will be. Kene hi ratzon, may it be God's will. Amen. Friends, from here, we're going to gather. We'll do the rituals that are necessary and appropriate here at the end of the ceremony at the temple and move to the cemetery. Those of you who are going out will get instructions from our good friends at Levinson's, who I add to the thanks that have already been given to those who were responsible of giving so much of themselves for helping to make this day so much easier than it needed to be or could have been. I want to add my thanks to the family's thanks to the doctors, to the caregivers at hospice, to our friends at Levinson's. You guys know what quality is, and you found it for him at every step along the way. Having met his doctor, having seen the hospice folks in place, there's no question about that. I'm going to ask those of you who are not going out to the cemetery with us to let the ones who are follow the instructions when they're given, so that we can do this in a somewhat orderly fashion. I'll let Levinson's give the instructions that we need. But before we get to that, I invite you to rise physically and spiritually as you are able for the El Malei Rachamim, the prayer of God's mercy that is traditional at moments such as this. El Malei Rachamim shochein bamromim hamtzei menucha nechona tachat kanfei hashchina im kedoshihim utehorihim kezohar harakia mazirim et nishmat farfel Avrum ben Yankel v'Sara Rivka shehalach leolamo Bal harachamim yastirehu בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Philip Charthower, who has now entered eternity. God of mercy, let him find refuge in the shadow of your wings. Let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. O God, you are his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us all say, Amen. Please be seated. And before I turn it over to Levinson's for some final instructions, a quick reminder that the family will be observing Shiva from the time we get back from the cemetery later this afternoon through Friday afternoon with minion services at 7 p.m., Sunday night tonight through Thursday night each night at the house. And we hope to see you there, where we will be sharing stories until we can't share stories anymore. Adam?
Folks, interment will take place following the service here at Mount Lebanon Cemetery in Adelphi. Just a quick note for everyone attending, we will not be going in a formal procession, so if you're attending the cemetery portion, please just go ahead and meet us there. Another quick note, at the cemetery, please avoid using the Adelphi Road entrance exit for safety reasons. As I call your names, will the following active pallbearers please come to the front of the sanctuary? Louis Anoff, Joshua Anoff, Daniel Anoff, Paul Ostroy, Michael Anspach, and Adam Fisher. And will the following honorary pallbearer please come to the front of the sanctuary? Just Sean? Yeah. Sean Wilson. Will everyone please rise? Ladies and gentlemen, this does conclude the portion of the funeral here at Temple Solel. If you're going to the cemetery again, please just meet us there. Thank you for being here. This concludes the service.